Good morning, everybody. Welcome to this next instalment of the Procurement Act webinar this morning. If you've joined a Go for Growth webinar before, you will probably know us by now, but my name is Gillian Askew. I'm one of the directors and co-founders of Go for Growth. I'm your host for the next 45 minutes. As always, I've got great pleasure to be joined by my colleague Lauren from Go for Growth and Anna from YPO. We'll do proper introductions in a second. We'll just give it a few minutes for people to join us. As people are joining the webinar, I will just want to do a couple of housekeeping things before we get into introductions. So we've got a lot to cover in this next 45 minutes, actually. So we will be working at quite a high level. What I will say is, if you're wanting to drill down into any further detail on any of the things that we touch on today, there's a couple of things. We are likely to do at least a couple more webinars on Procurement Act before October. But if those aren't quick enough, or if they're not tabling the things that you want to chat about, you can always get in touch with us. So all our contact details are on the slides. So do feel free to either book a one-to-one or get in touch with myself or Lauren. If you've got any specific questions for YPO, you can table those to Anna as well. As always, if you've attended one of our events before, you'll know that we send a pre-event survey out. We did get a lot of questions actually through the pre-event survey for today's session. There's a couple of things. So one of the questions was around, are we going to be chatting about notices on today's session? So we've not tabling notices today. So what we are thinking, however, YPO and Go for Growth will come together to put together a guide to the Procurement Act specifically for SMEs, but it will be just as useful, I think, to buyers and commissioners as well, and notices will certainly be in there. So keep an eye out on that. If you do want to chat about notices in the meantime, though, do feel free to give us a shout. The other questions that we've had in the pre-event survey will table in the Q&A at the end. And my colleague Lauren is going to pop in the chat a link to a certificate of attendance. So we did have somebody to ask us as part of their continued professional development, and this might be specific to providers and suppliers that are on the call, but could we provide a certificate of attendance to those that come along? So that will be downloadable through the chat. If you can't download it for any reason, drop us a note to either myself or Lauren, and we will be able to email it out to you. But that's there, so hopefully that's useful. We are, as always, on Zoom today, so the session is being recorded. A copy of the slide deck and a copy of the recording will be sent out to you probably within about 48 hours of the session today. Feel free to ask questions and pose points for discussion throughout the session today. We will be quite strict on timing, so we will try and stick to the 45 minutes. So if there's anything we don't get to, we'll pick it up afterwards. Feel free to say hi and introduce yourself in the chat if you would like to also. So what we're covering today, you can see on the screen: transparency, supplier measurement, debarment list and register, contract management, and then what help is available out there, and then we'll take some questions at the end. So as I've said, my name is Gillian Askew. I'm one of 3 co-founders and directors of Go for Growth, and we're all about trying to help smaller organisations in the voluntary sector to navigate the world of public sector procurement. So that's me. Anna, can I ask you to do a quick intro, please?
Yeah, of course. Hello, everyone. My name is Anna Stapley. I'm Contracts Officer within YPO, and my main responsibility is to oversee compliance on all YPO procurements, and that includes all our internal contracts and any external frameworks that we establish for our customers.
Perfect. Thank you. And Lauren, can I ask you to do a quick intro?
Hi, I'm Lauren from Go for Growth. I tend to deal in Go for Growth with one-to-one, supplier-facing content creation. I have popped the certificate of attendance in the chat if everybody wants to check whether they can get that. And if for any reason you can't download it, do just pop a note in the chat and we'll can send a follow-up email.
Perfect. Thank you, Lauren. And Lauren, we'll keep an eye on the chat and the Q&A today. If you are using the chat, just make sure that it is set to who you want to see it, hosts and panelists or everyone. If you have specific questions, if you could put them in the Q&A, that would be helpful, but we will keep an eye on both as we go through. So in the interest of time, we'll get kicked off. So we are thinking about supplier measurement first off. And for me personally, I think good procurement for a long time has been about more than those traditional KPIs of on-time delivery and the budget assessments, and they will remain core elements and pillars of good procurement. But what the Act, I think, is trying to do is firm up those measurements of those other impact areas like social value, understanding sustainability and environmental stewardship, and also looking at things like long-term efficiency. And the Act is really encouraging innovation. We've always struggled with innovation, I think, in procurement. It's a difficult one for a regulatory environment to manage. To be truly innovative, it needs to be new. And so it's, it's often quite hard for innovation to be procured in the way that we would like it to. So there is a real focus in terms of innovation. The Act is hoping to, well, it is providing much more flexibility, I think, for contracting authorities to deliver the intended outcomes of procurement. So it's trying to create an environment that will be fit end user outcomes that we need to deliver. And what that means for suppliers, I guess, is we as providers to the public sector will need to make sure that we can adapt and enhance our reporting mechanisms and our own performance tracking systems to make sure that we can track, measure and monitor and demonstrate value in those areas such as social value, such as environmental impact, and also innovation, sustainability, etc. In addition to those stalwarts of good procurement in terms of on-time delivery and cost considerations. Things like social value isn't new necessarily, but the Act is definitely firming up those things. And most people will be familiar, certainly if you're on the call from a procurement perspective, with meat versus MAT. If you're a supplier, you might not be just as familiar, but meat is the most economically advantageous tender and MAT is the most advantageous tender. And effectively, what we think the shift from cost to quality, meat versus MAT is driving that. And effectively, in layman's terms, what meat versus MAT is saying is cheapest doesn't have to win. Lowest cost doesn't have to be the only show in town. And we are definitely expecting under the Act that some tender opportunities might disregard pricing altogether, and that value for money through evaluation will be written into and be an integral part of the service or product specification rather than just a standalone criterion. And in terms of innovation, those innovative ideas or approaches, especially under the new flexible procedure, it'll open a whole new realm of opportunities for contracting authorities, especially when it comes to trying to measure something that is less tangible. And that's the thing that I think we've always struggled with a little bit in procurement. And from a practical perspective, there's a lot of evidence around or questions, I guess is the right way to put it, in terms of actually what we put in our bids and tenders, do they get measured effectively through contract management? Anna's going to talk about contract management in a bit more detail, but greenwashing, for example, overstating claims in terms of social value benefit, environmental benefit, sustainability, those things will receive greater focus under the Act. And so it will be harder for businesses either to double count those things or to overstate those opportunities. And we shouldn't be overstating those things now. But the Act does create opportunities for contracting authorities, to be able to have more flex in terms of reflecting the outcomes that are intended, but also in measuring performance going forward. I'll hand over to you, Anna, I think, on transparency.
Yeah, thank you. So for those of you who don't know, we mentioned during the last webinar that transparency is not explicitly mentioned in the Procurement Act as one of the principles, as opposed to Public Contract Regulations 2015, which is our current regime. Instead, the whole Procurement Act is laced with transparency, so to say, through various tools and obligations. So for example, we have public reporting. And as part of the increased focus on transparency and new regulations aiming to focus on the life cycle of the procurement as a whole, summaries of supplier performance will be published in certain circumstances. For example, contracting authorities will need to set a minimum of 3 KPIs for contracts with value of 5 million or over, assess performance against those KPIs, and publish performance assessment. It is worth also to note that apart from the usual KPIs, which can be strictly associated with delivery of a given product or service, we will be probably seeing more KPIs relating to value-added services, and this could include ratings or scores on sustainability, innovation, and social value contributions. We also will be having better access to information. So stakeholders, including general public, will have greater access to information about how supplies are selected and monitored. And this will include investigations and inclusions into the debarment list, annual performance assessment, and publications on the procurement investigations, which is section 108 in the Procurement Act, where contracting authorities' compliance with the Procurement Act may be investigated, with recommendations and results of the investigation being published. It is also expected that there will be better feedback mechanism, and this could be mechanisms for public feedback on supplier performance, especially for services directly impacting communities. So things like surveys such as public perception service or post-contract service might be utilized to measure public perception of the effectiveness and transparency of the procurement process. There is also potential for public online feedback portals. We've not seen anything solid yet on potential feedback tools. However, there is a good chance that those start to emerge as contracting authorities and suppliers get more comfortable with the new regime. So suppliers need to pretty much be ready for increased scrutiny. So taking all those things that we just mentioned now, suppliers should be prepared for higher level of scrutiny regarding their performance and practices. And this includes being ready to demonstrate compliance with environmental standards, social value contributions, and innovation commitments. In addition, as opposed to Public Contract Regulations 2015, where it was suppliers' responsibility, to ensure information is provided in the selection questionnaire is accurate. Under the new Procurement Act, it will be contracting authorities' responsibility. So potential providers can therefore expect intensified communication between yourselves and the contracting authority during the tender process itself. Suppliers may also need to adapt more transparent operations and reporting practices to ensure they can meet public disclosure and accountability standards set forth by the Act. So these practices will be also expected from subcontractors, where they are classed as essential subcontractors or organizations relied on. And also suppliers involved in the public sector tendering might find value in proactively engaging with stakeholders, including the public, to build trust and demonstrate their commitment to the goals of the Act. So it is important to know that while increased transparency is a goal of the Procurement Act 2023, the specifics regarding the public availability of supplier measurement details will depend largely on how the Act is implemented and the guidelines issued by relevant procurement authorities. Suppliers, however, should stay informed about these developments to understand how the performance information might be shared and used in the public domain. And suppliers are, of course, encouraged to check learning and development offer from the Cabinet Office, where some training opportunities is specifically designed for the suppliers. Can we go to the next slide, please?
Sure.
Thank you.
And thank you for that, Anna. And we've got a slide in a little bit around the knowledge drops and where SMEs can go to get the information. So I think this is me, isn't it, Anna, on debarment. Debarment, I guess it's my observation of it, certainly when I went to Procurement Act Expo, is there is a lot of questions around debarment. How's it going to work? What does it mean? Should I, as a provider, be nervous of the debarment list? And so on the screen, what you can see are the grounds for debarment. I won't go through those today. If you want to chat to me about any of those in more detail, do give me a shout. But what I do want to go through is the process for debarment. So before debarment investigation, there is a pre-assessment on applications, which effectively ends with a submission to the Minister of the Crown for investigation. And the length of time of a debarment itself and how that will apply, that will vary. And the Procurement Review Unit will be engaging with supplier groups on how debarment works starting from May, so from next month, hopefully. And there'll be more guidance on debarment and the PRU oversight, the Procurement Review Unit oversight. They will be provided in batches 5 and 7 of the government resources. But the expected debarment process, and I will stress that this might change, is that typically there'll be investigation first and evidence gathering. This process will not be taken lightly by the government or by the public sector. So suppliers can have, I think, some confidence and faith that it will have rigour and structure in the process. So it will start with investigation, evidence gathering. Typically, the process begins with an investigation into the supplier's conduct or performance, and that will involve gathering evidence of the alleged failures or the alleged misconduct. The next phase will be notification and response. So the supplier in question is usually notified of the potential for debarment and given opportunity to respond to those allegations, providing evidence or arguments against the debarment. Following all of that, a decision will be made based on the evidence and the responses that have been given. The decision is often made by a specific regulatory body or the procurement authority, but it has to be based on the evidence that is in front of whoever is making that decision. If the decision to debar has been made, then that it comes a publication phase. So the details of the debarment, including the supplier's name and the reasons for debarment, might be published or may be published in a public register. And that's consistent with the Act's emphasis on transparency that Anna was just talking about. Duration and appeal, debarment can be for a specific period. It is temporary or indefinite, I guess is another way of putting it, depending on the severity and misconduct or failure. But typically, I think when we were at Procurement Act Expo, I was talking to Cabinet Office, if you haven't appealed within 5 years, for example, you drop off the debarment register anyway. So you don't stay on there ad infinitum if you are on the debarment register, but you do have the right of review and appeal. So suppliers typically will have the right to appeal against a debarment decision. And you might also ask for a review to be done if you have made and you can evidence that you've taken changes or made changes, taken action to remedy the reason for the debarment in the future, in the first place, sorry. So you can appeal the decision, and you can also, in the period of debarment, ask for a review to be undertaken for early removal, subject to remedial action that you've taken of those issues that you were debarred for in the first place. In terms of the implications for suppliers, obviously, debarment has serious implications for suppliers, including very obvious what it means if you're publicly on a debarment list. Could that lead to reputational damage, loss of business opportunities, and potential financial distress? And so it underscores the importance of all the things that underpin public procurement in the first place: compliance, ethical behaviour, but also performance in terms of how we actually run contracts and how we perform as suppliers to contracting authorities. It would be useful, I think, and I don't want to set hairs running, so I don't want to unnecessarily worry suppliers, but I think it is always useful to understand the specific grounds and processes that debarment will have in Procurement Act. So it would be useful for suppliers to get deeper understanding of debarment and to understand in your organisation what compliance and risk management systems you have available to yourself to prevent even inadvertent issues that are happening that could create debarment in the future. The debarment procedures, they can vary based on specific legislation and regulatory guidance, but you can either consult legal advice or you can consult the Procurement Act 2023 itself to understand those exact mechanisms and protections in place under the new framework. But as we've said all along, you can chat to us as well. We will learn more as we get closer to October, but that is in essence how we think debarment process will work going forward. And it will be based on an evidence-based process, which you have as a supplier the right to appeal against, the right to answer, and the right to have a review. Anna, have you got anything to add on debarment before we move on?
No, I think you've summed it up really well, Jill. I think the most of this new information we got from the recent Procurement Act, so the specific process of inclusion supplies into the debarment list. But yeah, like you said, it's going to be a structured process, so it's not simply a case of contracting authority flagging up with the relevant body that there was a breach and they get supplier gets automatically drawn up to the debarment list. There will be investigation going on.
Yeah, absolutely. And importantly, before debarment, the supplier has a right of reply.
Yes.
So if you disagree with the reasons for debarment, you will have the opportunity to do something with that. So it's not done to you in that way. Perfect. Have we got any questions, Lauren, before we move on?
Nothing in the Q&A up to now.
Okie doke. Okay. So Anna, I'll hand over to you on contract management, if that's okay.
Yeah. So contract management is another big thing under the Procurement Act, as Jill's already mentioned, and it's crucial for suppliers to familiarize themselves with new approaches that will be adopted by contracting authorities. So first of all, we have performance tracking. There will be regular detailed assessment of supplier performance against contract specification and broader objectives. We already mentioned today that especially on contracts above £5 million, but it is expected that it will set precedent for lower value contracts as well. So there will be greater emphasis on appropriately monitoring performance on all public sector contracts. We also have adaptability and flexibility, and this is more from contracting authorities' standpoint. So contracts should allow for adjustment in response to changing needs and circumstances without compromising on accountability. So contracting authorities should account for those changes in specifications as there is very limited scope for changes when a contract is live under the new Procurement Act. There also should be proactive identification and management of risks throughout the contract life cycle to prevent disruptions and to ensure continuous improvement. So most of the risks should be identified at the preliminary engagement stage, where suppliers take active part in building specification and even helping to design the tender procedure. But as we all know, it is not always possible. And then we've got on-time payment. So again, greater emphasis throughout the supply chain on time payment for suppliers. Authorities will need to report on their compliance with Section 69, payment compliance notices, and all payments on the all public sector contracts must be made within 30 days. So contract management under the new Procurement Act goes beyond the administrative oversight of contract execution, and it embraces strategic approach to ensure contracts deliver the intended value and outcomes. Also compared to Public Contract Regulations 2015, where there is focus on rigid award procedures, the Act requires a more dynamic and collaborative approach to contract management, where suppliers and contracting authorities work closely to achieve mutual goals. So suppliers must be prepared for more frequent interactions, performance reviews, and possibly adjustment to contracts based on ongoing evaluations. So how can suppliers prepare for the new contract management approach? Well, first of all, suppliers will need to develop comprehensive reporting mechanisms, or should develop comprehensive reporting mechanisms to show their performance, to showcase their performance across various indicators, including sustainability and social value. Also, suppliers, to stay competitive, suppliers should invest in innovative practices and technologies that can improve service delivery and contribute to environmental and social goals. And suppliers also should prepare for more collaborative relationship with procurement bodies. This will include regular feedback loops and joint efforts to address challenges. Again, early engagement will be especially significant at the preliminary market engagement stage, where authorities may need suppliers' assistance to develop procedures, KPIs, and even the award criteria. I think I'm going to pass over to you now, Jill. That's all right.
Yeah, cool. Thank you, Anna. I think one of my observations for both supplier and buyers and commissioners is there'll be a reflection, I think, on resourcing for all these new requirements. Lots of SMEs and small businesses might find it challenging to put some of the reporting and risk management processes and systems in place. But equally, I think some of the procurement teams will be currently thinking about, well, how do we do this compliantly and best under the new regulations to achieve our outcomes in procurement. So I guess what I'm trying to say in a very roundabout way is we're all learning about how we apply the Act, both from a provider's perspective, but also from a contracting authority's perspective. And it will be challenging for all of us, I think, to find our way through some of these new requirements. We are going to talk a little bit about strategies for SMEs. So I guess one of the things it's worth remembering is that there is a duty placed on procurement under the Act for contracting authorities. So they must bear in mind that small to medium enterprises might face particular barriers to participation, and there is a real duty to consider what those barriers might be and how those barriers can be removed, and to take action to do so wherever possible. So in terms of being a small to medium enterprise to the public sector, the Act is really trying to engender support so that contracting authorities can access the whole marketplace, and that it is as accessible for all organisations. And there's a real duty in there to consider, understand and remove barriers to SMEs in the process, wherever that's practicable to do. Also, contracting authorities will have a duty to consider when they're bidding and putting bids and tenders out, the requirements that they are asking for, if they're proportionate to the contract. Consider those bidding times, are they realistic? And will those bidding times be inclusive? So will smaller organisations who don't have dedicated bidding teams, for example, will they be able to take part? There was a PPN that's just come out on the use of AI, for example. So bidding teams, bidding organisations, bid companies, bid writers, and the use of AI. I mean, the former have been around for a long time, but there is more and more use of technology to help organisations put bids together. So I know procurement are starting to think about, well, actually, how will the process work if we are going to be accessible to everybody? One of the things that the Act is trying to aim for is to make sure that there is a diverse representation of businesses, and that pre-market engagement really focuses on helping to make sure a contracting authority is reaching a wide range of suppliers. In the National Procurement Policy Statement, and if we haven't got a link to it in here, we'll put a link, Lauren, if we can make a note to put a link to the National Procurement Policy Statement out with the slide deck. That describes the procurement environment, and the current one talks about pipelines. There is a new National Procurement Policy Statement due out, I think in June. Anna, is it June-ish time?
Yeah.
But currently, the NPPS talks about pipelines, so visibility of commercial pipelines, up to 18 months for opportunities over 2 million. It talks about focusing on preliminary market engagement, and of course, things in the Act like single registration point and essential digital platform will really aid some of those things. I did just notice in the post-consultation responses that contracting authorities will not be held to the pipeline that they publish. It is a best estimate of what you know at that time. And certainly when we talk to providers and suppliers, more is more. I think the marketplace understands that things can change, but the more visibility that we can have of opportunities coming up, the better prepared organisations can be. What you can see on screen are some links to particular guides that Cabinet Office have put out, some collections of information around transforming public procurement and some of the knowledge drops as well. Our advice would always be, if you are an aspiring supplier to the public sector or a current supplier to the public sector, there are lots of these workshops and webinars that are going on. I know everyone's really busy, but attend what you can, or at least get the slide decks and usually they're video recorded, so you can watch those after. And early preparation to take part in competitions is really important. And as the commitment to social and environmental impact grows through the Act, understanding what you can do in that environment and being ready to demonstrate evidence and measure those impacts will be really useful. What we've got on the screen, and I'm not going through these, but we have got knowledge drops that the Cabinet Office have put out. So those are links for suppliers and then 3 specific links for small to medium enterprises and the voluntary sector. What you will also see is a link to TikTok. So we have taken the knowledge drops that the Cabinet Office have put out, and we are taking some of the key messages and building a series. I think there are 5 out already, Lauren, on our TikTok channel. But in essence, what we're trying to do is take those knowledge drops and distill them into shorter bursts of information that might be useful for people to have a look at. So it's the same information that the Cabinet Office are providing, but just referenced in shorter video bursts. So hopefully that will be helpful. Do feel free to have a look. And just before we move on, I think, Anna, you're going to cover YPO, and I'll talk a little bit about the support that's available from Grow for Growth. We'll just check if we've got anything in the chat or Q&A before we move on. Is there anything, Lauren?
Yeah, just a couple of things. So one question, whether there is a financial or legal cost for either party if there is a debarment case.
So I had a look at that. I actually don't know the answer to that. I don't know. I don't think so. Nobody has mentioned a financial charge to me. Anna, would you know anything on that?
I don't think, well, it's just a guess, but I don't think there will be any. I think when we're talking legal financial cost is if authority takes supplier to court, which is a separate case, or if supplier takes authority to court, which I don't think, it would be separate from the debarment.
Yeah, I think so. We certainly haven't heard anything be mentioned about there being a punitive financial issue simply for being debarred for either contracting authority or the supplier. But you're right, if that goes into a legal case, then that would be different, but separate from debarment. Sorry, Lauren.
No, I was just saying there was just one more. Sorry, I thought you'd finished up.
But
it was just to confirm, how would you ensure that you're not placing one provider over another in an advantaged position when you're developing a tender? So, for example, would that be specifications or KPIs?
Yeah, go on, Anna. Sorry, we're going to say something.
There's several provisions in the Act that authorities need to abide by, which is being proportionate, fair, provide equal treatment to all potential participants. and contracting authorities must ensure that they are not putting anyone in an advantageous position. If they do, for example, during preliminary engagement stage where you develop all your KPIs, award criteria and specification, if you put a supplier at the advantageous position, then they must be excluded from the tender process, technically.
Okay, thank you. That's useful. Thank you, Anna. Would you give us a super quick overview of YPO, and then we'll move into Q&A once we've done that?
So for those of you who don't know what YPO are, we were formed in 1974 and we are based in Wakefield. So currently we are celebrating our 50th year anniversary. We are UK's largest public sector buying organisation with a turnover of 119 million in 2022. YPO are 100% publicly owned and all profits are returned to our public sector customers. YPO employ about 500 staff, and we aggregate buying power and generate savings in procurement for public sector customers. YPO have 13 member authorities and 71 associate members. YPO have national coverage, and that includes all education establishments, nurseries and childminders, blue light services, charities, local authorities and central government. So in total, we have above 30,000 customers. Similarly, we have more than 30,000 products and over 100 frameworks ready for our customers to use. And we do anything really from pens and paper to electricity, food and insurance. Our stock products are delivered from our warehouse in Wakefield. We have also direct items which are more complex and bulky items delivered directly from suppliers to our customers. And we are constantly trying to develop our range in line with our customer needs. YPO are also trying to grow fair trade sustainable alternatives. So how to become a YPO supplier? First of all, have a look at our e-tendering portal, because YPO carry out all its tendering and procurement activity via Pro Contract. So you can see a link on the screen. The easiest way to be notified about all new opportunities is to register there and see what becomes available. Most of our procurements do not have any limit on the number of submissions, so everyone is allowed to apply. And once you register, you can set up your business classification. When opportunity becomes available that matches your classification, you will get automatically notified. It is worth pointing out that YPO are not the only authority using this e-tendering portal, so you will have an access to plenty more opportunities published by other authorities. You can also search for active opportunities on this portal, and there is a good chance you will be able to find a fair number of dynamic purchasing systems which are open for submissions throughout their entire duration, unlike framework agreements. Also, please have a look at Finder Tender Service and Contracts Finder, which are publicly available government platforms used by contracting authorities to publish information on live and awarded contracts. And while Finder Tender Service is expected to be replaced by single digital platform under the new regime, you can still use it to browse for opportunities. And last but not least, have a look at YPO website and social media, because often YPO tend to promote new and exciting opportunities there, which will also give you information on how to participate in a given tender, for example. And on our website, you can also register for Meet the Buyer events, where you will have an opportunity to speak to the buyer for a particular category. Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you, Anna. I'm going to super quick just cover a little bit about the support that Go for Growth gives. Our job is to support any provider in any sector of any size who is hoping to either start out or grow in the public sector. So you can see on screen the types of things that we support. So If you want any help managing portals, any of the portals that the public sector use, we can help you find the opportunity in the first place and understand the basic tools that you need in your toolkit in order to take part. And that includes environmental stewardship and delivering social value. And if you have been unsuccessful in the past and you've got feedback from that process, you can have an in-confidence conversation with us about that feedback, and we can really try and help you as much as we can in order to build on that feedback that you've got and use it to help you grow in the future. And we have some tools that are available for us, to us and to providers for doing that. So you can have one-to-one coaching, and we do attempt to make everything as personalised as possible. We don't want anyone to wade through anyone else's treacle. We've got lots of online courses. We have a self-service platform. Our public sector supplier ready accreditation will act as two things. It will help you identify some of the areas that you might need to develop in order to take part well in public sector opportunities, but also achieving that accreditation can let customers know that you are public sector supply ready. And we have just this week announced that if you as an organisation go through the PSSR, the Public Sector Supply Ready accreditation, you will also get CPD hours, 12 CPD hours. So the accreditation is now dual certified through CPD as well. Everything that we offer on behalf of the public sector is done so free of charge. The public sector commission us. So if you are an aspiring or existing supplier to the public sector, all of the support we give you is offered with no cost. So please do feel free to utilise that. And this will come out in your slide deck. So if you want to get in touch with us, please feel free to do so. And in the interest of time, we've just got 9 minutes left. I will stop sharing and we'll take some Q&A. We did, as I said, have some Q&A that came over in the pre-event, what's it called? It's gone out my survey that went out. I couldn't think for a second. So we'll cover those first. And if you're live on the webinar, if you've got any further questions or discussion points, please feel free to pop those together. So we had a few people in the pre-event survey that said, how will the Act simplify things for SMEs? I think what we're hoping is the series of webinars that we're doing will help providers in stages to understand how the Act is trying to be helpful to suppliers, especially small to medium enterprises. However, Go for Growth and YPO have been chatting, and one of the things that we think might be super helpful is if we could put together potentially a guide almost for SMEs on the Procurement Act. So it will be supplemented by the webinars and all the other information that both organisations are already putting out. But we are hoping to work together on a specific guide targeted at SMEs, but I do think it will be just as helpful for buyers and commissioners over the next month or two. So keep an eye out for that. We will both be active on social media once we've put that together to share it. So keep an eye out for that. We did have a very specific question around tendering for adult education budget that's allocated by DfE, the Department for Education, through local mayoral combined authorities. It's quite difficult for us to answer a very specific question like that in this session. So if the person who posed that question, our surveys are anonymous, so if the person who posed that question is on the webinar today, could I ask that you get in touch with me directly and we'll chat about the specifics in a one-to-one, if that's okay. And there was also another very specific question around high quality teacher training in the fitness sector through national governing bodies such as Sport England or were recognised by Sport England. Again, it's very specific. So again, if the person who posed that question is on the webinar, please do feel free to book a one-to-one with me. The bookable calendar is on the slide deck. So if you get in touch, that would be great, and we can chat about what your situation is. There was a question on a university's procurement threshold. So up to 50k requires 3 quotes, above 50k requires a tender. There was a question for clarification if Reg 87 statement meant that spends greater than 30,000 would now need to be compulsory advertised through a contract notice, i.e. would they need to be tendered? Anna, you gave us a question to that. Are you happy to cover that answer,
Yeah, of course.
please? Thank you.
So the question referred to Section 87 of the Procurement Act, which is regulation on the Part 6, which covers on the threshold procurements. So Section 87 applies in line with the Section 85 of the Act, and Section 85 states if the contracting authority invites the submission of tenders in relation to the award of a regulated below threshold contract, the authority may not restrict the submission of tenders. So the key word here is if. So this means that contracting authorities do not have to tender for the below threshold contracts, but if they choose to invite tenders, then Part 6 of the Procurement Act must be followed. So the entire tender process must be conducted with publication of appropriate notices for below threshold contracts. So in a nutshell, you don't have to follow the process in the Part 6. But again, if you choose to invite tenders, then full suite of regulations must be followed under Part 6. Also, the question was asked by the university. Important thing to remember here is that contracting authorities who are classed as schools under the Procurement Act are excluded from the Part 6. So to make sure you are classed under the definition of schools, please have a look at Section 123 of the Procurement Act, because there is a good chance you might not need to follow this regulation, this part of the Procurement Act at all.
Brilliant. Thank you, Anna. And in the interest of time, we are just a little over, but if everybody's okay, we have got one live question that we'll try and answer. I know some people have had to leave already. Anna, I'm going to ask you if you know the answer to this actually. Construction contracts, is it expected that the new Act will require amendments to standard forms in relation to KPIs and consequences of failing against those KPIs?
Standard forms, as in, does that mean terms and conditions or?
Yeah, I'm not sure. The question just says, is it expected the new Act will require a standard form contract is the T's and C's? Yeah, that's what the question is aiming at.
So I don't think that the new Procurement Act specifically requires you to have something bespoke for the works, but you probably will need to because of the nature of the services provided. I think under the new Procurement Act also as currently, but it will also depend on the guidance coming up from the government, as potential providers will need to be CAS or PAS registered or qualified.
Okay. All right. Brilliant. Thank you, Anna. The only other things we had was about the attendance certificates, which we've done. And we did have a provider who is struggling to get involved in the API on the central digital platform. So if you are on the webinar today, we are trying to get in touch with Cabinet Office to find out what the process is, because there's a number of people I think who are interested in being part of that API. So we'll come back to everybody on that particular one. So hopefully that's been useful today. I'm sorry we've run over by 3 minutes, but hopefully that was useful. If you have any questions that we haven't had time to table, or you do want to have any further conversations with us on this, please do get in touch. All the contact details are there. And yes, we will definitely email the slides and a copy of the recording out to everybody, probably within the next 48 hours, no later than that. So if there's nothing else, thank you, Anna, once again for supporting us today. It's brilliant to have you and your knowledge be a part of this. Hope everybody has a great Tuesday, and do feel free to get in touch if we can help. Thanks all.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye. Bye-bye.